Okay, I'm going to walk us through how to do our colonial word wall presentation. Our purpose for this one, I'm just going to go through, say some of the words, and this will help us to hear the pronunciation of some of these. When you're doing the activity at the end, we will walk through that one in class. Each slide has an image, a term, and a definition. We're going to go through and we can draw our own image or mine, and then we'll write the entirety of our term's definition. This is similar to what we did when we were doing our Spanish vocab. If for some reason you're not completing this at school, here are your instructions for students who are not present with me. I'll have to move my little inset here around as we do some of the words to make sure that we can see it. An armada up here on the top, we can see an armada. And then this is a fleet of Spanish ships that were fighting against England at the time. Another word that we might use today, a little bit more common, would be a navy. An armada is a Spanish word for a group of ships fighting against England. Cash crop. A cash crop is valuable crops grown to sell and export. At the time of the colonies, the ones that we're looking at are indigo and tobacco and rice. Those are three of the big ones at the time. A cash crop, something that you could sell for lots of money. It doesn't cost very much to make, and then you can sell it for a lot of money. Charter. This word is charter. A charter is kind of like a fancy term for a permission slip. We can think about it too. It's a document specifically from the king that gives someone else permission to start a colony in another area. And this is a picture of the Charter of 1606 by King James. At this time, most of our colonies, if you asked why or who gave you permission to be there, they'd hold up their charter. A colony is a group of people who live in one place that are ruled from someone else. If I went off and started a classroom outside of the building and I followed all of SPMS's rules and guidelines, it could be a colony because I'm following the rules that are governed by our principal here, even though I'm somewhere else. A colony is a group of people in one place who are following laws from somewhere else. Export. Export is selling goods out of the country. Here we have a item going along for our trades. We have fish and lumber going from the United States to England. England is exporting manufactured goods. So if they're taking in the lumber, one of the things they're often doing with that is creating it into ships. And that lumber then is sent out. And it's going to the West Indies, and then it's going up. And their West Indies are exporting sugar and molasses to the United States. Fertile, this is a word that we've looked at before. Fertile is rich soil for planting. One thing nice about the area where we're at right now is we have very super strong and fertile fields out around St. Peter. Opposite of export, import. I'm bringing things into the country. Minnesota exports a lot of health goods, but one thing we import could be gasoline and raw petrol. Import, we bring it into the country. Indentured servitude is something that we look at when we talk about Ben Franklin and how he started and Paul Revere. And an indentured servant is someone who's working for 4 to 7 years typically, and that's kind of like you're paying your ticket to America. Often these people started from England and they didn't have enough money to buy their boat ticket. And so they would find someone and say, hey, I'll work for you for 4 years. You buy my ticket and I'll come work. And then I'll kind of work that cost of the ticket. Oftentimes they would learn a trade and then start their own printing press, candle maker, soap maker, whatever it is at the end of that 4 to 7 years. An indentured servant. And Jamestown is the first successful colony for England in the New World. We looked at Roanoke, but it's not as successful because it disappeared. We have our first successful colony being Jamestown in Virginia. A joint stock company. Now remember, I'm going kind of quick. I'm not doing any of the writing right now. I'm just saying the words a few times and talking about the definitions. Joint stock company. Two or more businesses that are working together to fund some different investments. A joint stock company would be if Mr. Unmentionable and I pooled our money together and we went off and we started a coffee shop. That could be a joint stock company. This is going to be two different businesses, two different sources of income, two different people combining their money together to do something else. Often our colonies were started by joint stock companies, people pooling their money to go get a charter to set up a colony. Look at that. That was 3 vocab words in one sentence. Parliament. Parliament is the law-making body in England. Parliament. Plantation is a large farm on which crops are raised mainly to sell. This isn't like a backyard garden. This is a large farm. To put it into perspective, here in St. Peter, we're just a little bit under the size of George Washington's plantation. Gigantic farm. And while George Washington and people on plantations would eat some of the food that they'd have, oftentimes it's going to be made of the cash crops because their plantation is their moneymaker. That's what they're doing for a job. They might eat some of it, but its purpose is to sell. Roanoke Colony, North Carolina. This is England's first attempt at a colony, and we have our lesson in class where we go through what could have happened to the colony at Roanoke. Triangle trade. The triangle trade is trade between Europe, America, and North and West Africa. On my mouse here, we can kind of see this in the shape of a triangle. And what would often be happening is you'd have those kind of, what on the previous slide, we talked about lumber being cut down from this big old growth forest in the New World. And that lumber gets sent across to Europe, where that is often put into manufactured goods, something that it would be created into a ship. That ship is then sailed down along the coast of Africa. Lots of times their ship is coming down full of some sort of textile or something to sell. Along that coast of Africa, this is where the slave trade is really starting. And slaves are captured, forced to board on the ship, horrendous conditions, brought over to the West Indies. Sometimes they'd stop around here. Lots of slaves were sold off in the West Indies. Some were brought up again. Not as many into that little part down here, into the southern coast, forced to work in the plantation, and then brought back loaded ships, brought back lumber over to Europe. So the whole trade was in the shape of a triangle. Not many people did the entire triangle. Oftentimes it was one boat's captain who just went back and forth, right? And as they were doing that back and forth, for example, on the top here, we would go over with a bunch of lumber, and then coming back would be full of people, sometimes indentured servants trying to get across to the New World, right? St. Augustine, Florida. This is the first permanent settlement in North America. Now we get into our word wall card. Sometimes we will do this in class, sometimes we will not. If we're making our word wall, we write the term super large. Your definition is your words or mine. It's kind of your choice. An illustration of the term, so that means a drawing of the term. You're able to do my drawing if you'd like, or you can do yours. And then when you're done, if you'd like to, you can do another term. And we'll talk about that all in class. Super awesome. That is a very, very, very quick rundown of this presentation, primarily just so we can hear some of the words, okay?